Dealing with attitude is one of the hardest parts of being a boss. But if you don't deal with it, not only are you setting up the person for future failure, it also spreads, and then all your good people start looking and questioning, why isn't it being dealt with? Why are they getting away with all of this? And why should I still continue to try? Hi, I'm Kathy Doherty and welcome to the People Navigator channel. If you own a small business or lead a small team and you want human-focused advice that's practical, implementable and realistic given the context of everything we have to deal with these days, you're in the right place. Today I'll walk you through how to have a clear, respectful conversation about attitude or behaviour without making it personal and without dreading it for days. So much so you'd prefer to replicate the head in sand ostrich. I always say context is key. In this context, before you launch into anything, pause and think about the training the individual got when they first became employed or first joined your team, and what experience did they bring when they first began with you, and what baggage. Also ask yourself, is this a change in what has gone before, or is this a continuing and potentially worsening pattern? All of that is important for these next steps. Get clear on the behaviour and don't label it. Don't go on the attack. When you begin the conversation, and this is why preparation is key, you want to phrase it in a way that encourages conversation, honesty, and where they feel they can tell you the truth rather than either trying to tell you what you want to hear or not giving very much away at all. And there are some things that they will already be aware of, but there may be plenty that they're not. And another thing when it comes to the context is key is, what about your own behaviours and attitudes? So before you address somebody else's, make sure you're aware of your own. Just in the event that somebody turns around, you challenge a behaviour or an attitude, and they then turn to you and say, well, you do that, why can't I? Preparation is key because you don't want to be put in that position, do you? I certainly wouldn't. I remember many moons ago, I was a young angelic chorister singing in the church choir, and our choir master said to me, I was a young teen at this stage, he said to me about my facial expressions, that you could read my thoughts very clearly through my facial expressions. At that point, I wasn't aware of any of this. And if you want to get an idea of what those facial expressions were, I mean, you can watch my videos and you can see me expressiveness, but have a think about Dairy Girls. Those seemingly exaggerated expressions. For teenage girls, they really weren't. So for example, if you're wanting to speak to somebody about rolling their eyes in a meeting, make sure you don't. Make sure you're aware of your own. And if you relay anything like that. But for me, once I became aware of that, I'm not saying I immediately took that into account, but as I went into the workplace, and particularly went into the HR people culture space, I realised how important it was that I was more measured and more controlled of my expressions. And this was all part of the learning, especially when it comes to my right eyebrow, which I will raise and it's like, my BS monitor is going off the scale saying, I don't believe you. And I had to learn to control that, especially in interviews, especially in maybe more difficult circumstances where I needed to be more professional, but we all learn from that. The person that you see before you today had a massive learning journey, and we all do. So whenever you approach the individual who maybe there is an attitude or a behaviour issue, think of their long-term developments, but there are also things you're going to want to nip in the bud quickly rather than let them develop or continue as they were. And the whole point of that is that you don't begin on the attack. Rather than saying you have a bad attitude, be specific. And this is where your preparation of having specific examples to demonstrate your point. If you don't have specific examples, then it's all rather vague. and it doesn't really help the individual to understand where you're coming from, which then makes for a much messier situation. Choose your setting, somewhere calm, somewhere private. We're inherently nosy. Find somewhere that you feel calm, you feel relaxed, you feel composed, but also somewhere where you feel assured in your position of authority, not in an authoritarian perspective, not in a bullying perspective, but you're in a position of authority, and you need to make sure that you feel it, that also when you're having this conversation, you're in control of yourself and you can control the environment as much as you can to ensure it remains calm, but also if things do get heated, that you're able to maintain your composure rather than potentially matching the individual's potential anxiety or defensiveness. Choose your setting wisely. I've said it before, and never address these issues in front of other people. Make sure you allocate enough time. You're better setting too much time rather than feeling you're under pressure and you need to wrap things up quickly. In order for this to be a meaningful conversation and a meaningful exchange, allow for a period of potential chit-chat, small talk, something to ease the situation, to get everybody in the right frame of mind that this isn't a personal attack. This isn't about creating defensiveness. This is about their personal development, their growth, their improvement. And you might need some time at the beginning to calm the nerves, to put in context that you're human beings. This isn't a personal attack on them. Whatever you need, factor all that time in so you don't feel under pressure and you don't have people knocking on your door or calling you or breaking that environment up, especially when you have taken time to curate it very, very carefully. And whether you need to write it down for yourself, the goal is improvement, not punishment. Now, this is in the context where it's maybe not a continual pattern of issues, a pattern of behaviours. I recall a client had an employee who mucked up. But what I also recommended as part of that, and the employer loved it, and actually the employee embraced it and said, okay, fair enough. The employee loved working where they were. They didn't want to move, but they would have, and they could easily have, had we taken a different approach. Be mindful of your options, is all I'm saying. And there are usually ways that you can improve somebody's awareness, their own education, their own understanding, without going heavy-handed. Be firm, but fair. When you're having the conversation, use I when you're talking about things. So you're talking from your perspective, and remain curious. Remember, this is all about opening up the conversation, not shutting it down and starting with allegations, because you're going nowhere. In fact, you're going down a route you won't want to go down, and the employee won't want to be taken down. You save that for the really, really majorly serious issues, but for where it's more of a, you're trying to deal with a bad behaviour, you're trying to nip it in the bud before it develops, or nip it in the bud before it bites you in the ass that I've mentioned before. Choose your language carefully, and this is why preparation will help you do that. You will feel less under pressure and better prepared. So when you're addressing something, phrase it, I've noticed this. I've noticed you roll your eyes in meetings, and I'm wondering what's going on, what's happening. You're wanting them to have the opportunity to explain, but also for them to feel like they are being given the opportunity to explain, that you're not trying to rush them quickly to move on to potentially you have a hidden agenda, that, oh, this is where it was always going to go. Remember, it's about improvement. Things can't improve unless you understand the underlying cause. And it could be that the individual is stressed. It could be work-related, it might be personal. It could be a combination of both. It could be that somebody is feeling under immense pressure as a result of a combination of things, and they may feel they're at burnout or they're fast approaching burnout. You want them to be able to share. And if you've been following the advice in all my other videos, then this becomes a more open and honest conversation based on trust and true connection. More often than not, an attitude or a behaviour issue doesn't come from bad intent. Quite often it can come from complacency, or somebody has just got a bit distracted. Don't assume the worst. At least try not to. Link the impact of their behaviour or attitude to the impact on their team, and the business? What are the consequences of this attitude or behaviour? What is the knock-on effect? I often say, and I'm always encouraging people to think it through. Don't just stop at the action or the issue. Think it through to the next stage and the next stage. Understand the ripples. Can you see where those ripples are? And for some of your team, this might be part of their awareness journey. They're increasing their own self-awareness of what they do, how it not only impacts on them, on your clients and customers, on their colleagues, on the business. What is their starting point? For example, say it is an individual who rolls their eyes in team meetings, and maybe you have been approached by other colleagues who said, this is how this makes me feel. What are you going to do about it? It could be that this is where the preparation comes in. Rather than mentioning names, rather than mentioning it in a context where it's easy to identify who may have spoken to you, you would phrase it, when you do this, this is how your colleagues feel. This is their response to it. And generally, unless you have the horrible person, somebody will not want their colleagues to feel like that. They will care about not just their own reputation, but the people they work with. That's most people, realistically. We all go through phases, but most people do care because nobody really wants to be the outcast. We all want that sense of belonging. So the more that somebody can understand the impact of their behaviours on their colleagues, on everything around them, you're giving them more opportunity to understand and to make improvements. Still being themselves, it's not about changing who they are, but it's being more conscious of the impact of their actions, their behaviours, their comments, where potentially it could be that how somebody has maybe been more abrupt with a customer or a client. It's then addressing that and encouraging them to understand how that could potentially damage the reputation of the business or damage those client-customer relationships and how that then impacts. The more that you can encourage the individual not only to identify them themselves, but also to think it through beyond the immediacy, the more reflective and the more aware your employees will become. And when you do set expectations of what those improvements need to be very, very clear, be specific, give them a deadline, and identify what support they need in order to make those improvements. For some, they may not know what that is. Give them time to consider and then come back. Don't give them a couple of weeks to consider, especially if the improvement needs to be immediate. But also be mindful of the ones who play the system, who may show signs of improvement initially while they feel they're under greater scrutiny. And then they relax and go back into a more complacent attitude. Factor in your follow-ups. I feel like a broken record every time I say follow up, but it's true. This is where it shows that all of this actually matters. There was a reason for it. It matters to the business. If you don't follow up, people forget, they move on, and they think it's done. And it more than likely isn't. But also the follow-ups gives each individual the opportunity to make the little tweaks, to ask for assistance. As things go on, then more might occur to them. How can I do this? I would like to do this. How can I do that better? Now that I'm more aware of this, I've become more aware of these other things. It then begins that flowing conversation of improvement. And that's kind of what you want in your people. You want them to become more aware and to ask more and to seek more themselves in terms of how they can become better. Because that then means they're contributing more and making your life better. Look, these conversations are rarely easy. They can feel awkward. You can have a preference for putting them off and hoping you won't have to deal with them, that maybe the individual will suddenly awaken and understand. But I'm sure there were things that somebody raised with you at some point, and that then gave you the opportunity to become better, to become who you are today. Give them that opportunity as well, and show that leadership to your people, that it is okay to not be perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect. We're all messy, we're all developing, we're all growing, we're all weaving our way through this thing called life and through our workplace, and that's okay. And remember, it's about being firm but fair. Have you been avoiding a chat like this? If so, what's one phrase or one approach that you could take away and implement today? Let me know in the comments, and remember to like, share, subscribe, do all those things to help me grow the channel and reach more people. And I want to thank everybody who has subscribed and shared this so far. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, and see you next time.